If I can ask members of council to please come to the council chambers. Members of council, if you can please take your seats. We do have quorum. Okay, can you please rise for the national anthem? Okay. Please remain standing, and during this time, please remember the following persons who have passed away: Danielle Moore and Nicholas Sion. Thank you. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. For the benefit of those who are connected to the internet, the City Clerk has posted all of the agenda materials for today's meeting at toronto.ca/council. Members, we have a presentation this morning to recognize Toronto Fire Services, and I would like to ask the City Manager, Chris Murray, to come forward.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Speaker. I think from the first day that I joined the Toronto Public Service, I talked about trust and confidence, which is in the essence of what it is as a public servant we're here to achieve. And so today's recognition of our Toronto Fire Service is one of those moments where we can demonstrate exactly how it is that we deliver trust and confidence to the residents of this community. So on March 12th, Toronto Fire Services was awarded accredited agency status from the Commission on Fire Accreditation International, making Toronto the largest city in North America with an accredited fire service. This is no easy task. There are about 256 KPIs which are looked at to see whether or not they meet the standard and have in place processes to continue to meet the standard. And so achieving international accreditation is not the end state for the Toronto Fire Service. Rather, it's an international validation of TFS's commitment to continuous quality improvement. As well, this is clear evidence that TFS is committed to providing effective, efficient fire protection services and continuing to achieve the public trust and confidence. And so I think, as Chief Pegg had said to me, our citizens and our business owners know when they go to bed at night or wake up in the morning, if there's a call that you're going to have a fire service that not only will be there, but will do exactly what they should do each and every time that their service is required. So I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank the many TFS personnel who have worked hard on this over the past 3.5 years. While that list is far too long for me to mention, I'd like to extend a special thanks to the members of the CFAI team who have worked very hard to get us to this important milestone, and they are here today, including Tony Bavada, John Burchat, Idina Kaufman, Mike Rember, and Kevin Doherty. Your hard work, dedication, leadership are evidenced by this outstanding international recognition as well. I'd also like to acknowledge the Toronto Professional Firefighters Association for their collaboration, support, commitment to this important work. And of course, their President Frank appeared before the Commission alongside Chief Pegg, who has provided both leadership and support along this journey. We'd not be able to achieve these goals without the continuing support of the association. So please join me in congratulating the Toronto Fire Service for this outstanding achievement, and then we're going to have the Mayor come and speak and provide them with the award. Thank you very much.
Speaker and members of Council, thank you, Chris, for introducing this most important subject, and I will reintroduce, just because I think it's always good to introduce them twice, but the people that are here today, our Chief, of course, Matt Pegg, from the Association, Frank Marmignano, Kevin McCarthy, and James Reed, and from the group that worked so hard on the accreditation, Tony Bavoda, our Deputy Chief, Julie Conway, and Idina Kaufman. And these, as I understand it, are the people that have been the principal actors in making this happen. And I am just acknowledging, really, as a member of Council and as Mayor, and on behalf of my colleagues here on Council, what a significant accreditation this is, and I think the City Manager covered it well. When you hear that we are the largest city in North America to receive this accreditation, I think you know this is not something ordinary that happens, and I think we all know of the work that is done by our professional firefighters all the way through the ranks in making sure people are protected and kept safe in our city. I think you know I make a point, as a number of you do, visiting major fire scenes, and just in the last 10 days I've been at two. One in North Toronto, where it was in a single-family home neighborhood, and there the miracle was more related to property than to people, although it was interesting to note that with all the firefighters there and all the people living close by, no one was injured. But it was a miracle that the one fire, the house that was on fire, was confined to that, and that none of the other houses caught on fire, and everybody was kept safe. The other one that was, in a way, a more remarkable experience for me was the one that was in the TCHC development in Etobicoke, and Councillor Deputy Mayor Holliday was there. And what was interesting about that one was, again, people were kept safe, and there was some property damage done, obviously, to those units, but the degree to which the two of us, Deputy Mayor Holliday and myself, were thanked through us to the fire service and the TCHC staff for the considerate way in which all of this was handled, where the residents were well looked after and kept safe, and arrangements were made when they were put out of their housing for them to be looked after, was quite remarkable. But it started with the fact that our firefighters did what they do 300,000 times every year, which is to respond to a call in a professional, competent, sensitive manner, and they do that even as our emergency calls rise by something in the order of 9% each year. This has been a 3-year journey. And as the City Manager mentioned, it was not without its rigors in terms of the hundreds of different things that are attended to as you sit in front of these accreditors and have to pass the test. And it is one of those things that I think is always the best to have. There were 11 people on the committee, and this accreditation was unanimously agreed upon by all 11, which again is not something that is necessarily to be expected. And I think it is just really evidence of just how well we are served here, no surprise. Now, I noticed in my previous list I didn't have on there, because I got that in a handwritten, and it was meant to be the most up-to-date, but John Burchat and Mike Rember were, I didn't mention in my previous introductions, and I apologize for that, but they were part of the team as well. But you know what? In the end, the credit for this goes to the Chief and all 3,200 people who serve us in the Toronto Fire Service. And I'd like to ask the group, large as it may be, right here, we're proud to have them here today, to come up and to have me give to them on behalf of the City Council something they earned, which is this most coveted accreditation that I think speaks volumes about the professionalism and excellence of our fire service. No surprise to us, but this is objective confirmation. Please come up and receive this and have a photo taken. Thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations. I will now call for a motion to confirm the minutes. Councillor Carroll, you have a motion on the minutes from our last two meetings.
I do. Good morning, Madam Speaker. The City Council confirmed the minutes of Council from the regular meeting held on February 26, 2019, and the special meeting held on March 7, 2019, in the form supplied to the members.
All those in favour? Carried. I will now call upon the committee chairs to introduce their reports. The chairs can speak about the reports for up to 5 minutes. Mayor Tory, you have a motion to introduce the Executive Committee report.
I do. Thank you, Speaker. I move that report from meeting 3 of the Executive Committee listed on the agenda of Council be presented for consideration. Today we'll be considering, first and foremost, there are a number of matters coming forward from the Executive Committee, a report from the City Manager, including a supplementary report, which includes the most up-to-date information on the ongoing discussions with the province about our transit system, as well as his proposals for a very significant public information and consultation initiative. I referred to it earlier this morning as a public engagement initiative as well, because I think it is very important that we engage the public and ensure that they understand the issues that are in front of us all with respect to the discussion of the so-called uploading, as well as other changes that may well be advocated by the province for our current transit plans. I have been clear throughout these discussions, going back to the beginning of this term and before, that any decision on uploading, which was widely and openly discussed during the course of the provincial election, but any decision on the so-called uploading as it affects our transit system needs to be in the best interests of the people of Toronto, including transit riders and employees, and that people and the city itself, the City Council, the City Administration, must be consulted and included in those discussions. And of course, at a prior meeting, we did authorize our City Manager, a professional public servant, to go to a table that spent a lot of time developing some terms of reference to have those discussions. That is the place where our concerns are registered, our position, which is that we believe the best result of this would be to leave the transit system in the hands of the City of Toronto, would be put forward, and where we would address concerns we have with some of the proposals from the other side of the table, as it were, are being put forward. And I believe that table is the right place to do that, and that we will see what emerges from that process. I will just put on the record again, as I did earlier this morning, as I've done many, many times, that if the result of that process is one that is unsatisfactory to the City of Toronto and to the people of Toronto and to the Council of the City of Toronto and its Mayor, I will have no hesitation whatsoever in opposing it as not being in the best interests of the City of Toronto. But I think we owe it to ourselves to be at that table, to put forward our views as strongly as we can, and to see if we can't come out with a resolution which, in the end, is mostly, in the eyes of the people, going to be about getting as much transit built as soon as possible with as much financial support from other governments as we can possibly achieve. So what we have before us today, Speaker, is our two reports with the latest information from the City Manager, and they provide some insight into the province's position on 4 transit projects. And some of the content in this letter that came was a revelation to all of us when it came literally on Monday morning at 9 o'clock. And I would just say that I heard the Minister of Transportation himself on radio this morning saying that that table that exists with the terms of reference that were agreed upon by the province of Ontario and by our City Manager as our representative there, he said everything was negotiable. And so I'm assuming that that is the case, and that that is a powerful reason in and of itself, among others, why we should be remaining at that table, and that is obviously what the City Manager's report refers to. He makes reference there, and I won't quote him again as I did earlier this morning, in saying that the only place, or the best place, that you can have those discussions is at a table with the province of Ontario where we would discuss these matters. I would point out something that I know members of council know very well, which is that every single one of the transit projects we could ever conceive of, almost without exception, require an extensive number of provincial approvals and provincial cooperation. And of course, most of them, if not all, require a significant degree of provincial financial participation. And so the notion that somehow we can sort of go it alone, regrettably in some ways, but the reality is that the notion we can go it alone is not something that is within any scope of reality that I think anybody would confront. So I think the top of mind concern for us, and we didn't know about this letter at the time the Executive Committee met, would be the notion of the delay for the projects. We have many concerns, of course, about the principle of uploading itself, which was to be discussed at this table. Now added to that are the proposed changes and the impact in particular they would have, if implemented, on delaying the building of transit in the City of Toronto, which is so sorely needed. And that is why I continue to believe, and we'll have a chance to dialogue with the City Manager on this and with each other today, that the best way to represent the City's interest is to continue to be at the table with the province. And the report asks you to approve staff recommendations which say, yes, of course, stay at the table, but also accompany that now with not only a robust public information campaign, but with the resources necessary to help the City Manager to do his job. And so I look forward to that discussion today, which is really the principal item, of course, on the report coming from meeting number 3 of the Executive Committee. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Holliday, would you introduce the Audit Committee report?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The motion is that the report from meeting 1 of the Audit Committee listed on the agenda of Council be presented for consideration. And I will just acknowledge there were 7 reports on the agenda of the Audit Committee. One of them was the external quality review of the auditor performed by outside reference points. And I would like to congratulate the auditor on successfully passing that and being acknowledged as a great Center of Excellence. And also the Auditor General's Office being accredited as a CPA training office in 2018. There are 6 additional reports, and I'll draw Council's attention to those, namely one on demonstrating the value of the Auditor General's Office. I think the committee enjoyed this report, and we're quite proud of the performance of the auditor over the last year, and she acknowledged that there were $300 million in savings. I'll say that again, $300 million in savings over 5 years. Those are verified savings. As part of the auditor's process, she will go back and work with management to look at the outcomes of the audits and ensure that these savings are being achieved, and she quantifies them in the reports. I'd also like to acknowledge several follow-up reports on outstanding audit items. Members of Council will be familiar with a number of the audits that we've put through over the years. The auditor does go back to the individual divisions and work with those divisions to look at the status of the findings. I think the Audit Committee took an interest in the status of many of these reports and the reporting back, and have asked the auditor to come back and highlight and focus on some of the outstanding audits. And also, of course, take a moment to acknowledge the work of City's management staff in implementing these audits. You can see with the report on the auditor's annual report in to the committee, and with the outstanding reports, just a sampling of the amount of work. And there's no surprise that we are seeing millions of dollars in savings. And the last would be about the fraud and waste hotline. The auditor spoke to us about some of the work on that. And although some of the findings and outcomes of the work around fraud and waste is not necessarily quantifiable in a dollar value, it is extremely important for the integrity of the public service and also people's perception in the integrity of our services here. And great work there on that. We've seen things such as the auditor's work on fire safety in our buildings, and we talked about that at council. And I believe that we are in a safer place because of that audit, and I believe that the public feels that as well. So if you have any questions about any of the items on the audit agenda, please, you're welcome to approach me or any of the members of the committee, or speak to the Auditor General herself. And also congratulations to the Auditor General's team on all of the achievements that they've achieved over the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cressy, would you introduce the Board of Health report?
Thank you, Speaker. This was the first meeting of our new, and first of all, that the report from meeting 3 of the Board of Health listed on the agenda be presented for consideration, and I'll move that. I'll just make a few brief comments. This was the first meeting of our new board and the first of mine in the chair, and we covered a range of issues, but I would just highlight very briefly 4 in particular. The first is as it relates to the overdose crisis. I should note for members of this chamber that overdose is now the leading cause of death of young people in our province and our city. And the number of deaths, despite our best intentions, right across the country are rising at an exponential rate. And the evidence has shown that these deaths are preventable. That when we approach it from a treatment, prevention, harm reduction, and enforcement lens, we can prevent these deaths. And so in Toronto, we have the Overdose Action Plan, and we recognize that while we are doing a great deal amount in our city, we know that all governments can do more, and so the board considered 2 items. One was an Indigenous layer for our Overdose Action Plan to focus on a disproportionate number of deaths within the Indigenous community, and the second was to expand the opioid substitution treatment options that are available, so both on a prevention, harm reduction, and treatment level. The second item I would flag, which is here in front of us at Council, is as it relates to heat relief. It's not a topic that gets the attention it deserves, but certainly for each and every one of you, your residents will notice it and feel it painfully so, is we have rising temperatures and unpredictability around those rising temperatures. And so we have more than 300 buildings in the City of Toronto that do not have air conditioning in each and every one of your wards. And those shoulder seasons, from September the 15th to June the 1st, there is an assumption that the heat has to be turned on in all of those buildings. It does not. And so you have residents of yours in buildings in April when it's 33 degrees Celsius in an apartment unit where the windows are closed and the heat is turned on. It can be over 40 degrees, and it is painful, and it can be deadly. And so there are a range of improvements and pieces of work that are underway around cooling spaces, adaptation, changes to our building codes and municipal codes related to the window protections, but also communications and a beefed up communication strategy to those property owners and landlords. And so that work is going to be on the agenda yet again next month at the Board of Health. And I want to take a moment to recognize and thank Councillors Matlow and Perks who have been at the board doing work on this. The final 2 items very briefly that we dealt with. One is cannabis edibles. Anytime you say cannabis edibles, there will be somebody else talking about it because lollipops and gummy bears and cannabis causes a headline. But we know that legalization is long overdue. We also know that in the fall, the federal government will confirm the legalization for edibles. And so the Board of Health proposed a framework to treat edibles in cannabis just like we do with tobacco, and that is to reduce the harm, looking at its advertising, its THC content, and its format so that it's not appealing to kids. And so Madam Speaker, those were the items that we dealt with at our committee, and I present them here for Council's consideration.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, you have a motion to introduce the Civic Appointments Committee report.
Yes, that the report for meeting 4 of the Civic Appointments Committee listed on the agenda of council be presented for consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, you have a motion to introduce the Economic and Community Development Committee report.
I do, and good morning, Speaker. That the report for meeting 2 of Economic and Community Development Committee listed on the agenda for council be presented for consideration. I would just like to briefly highlight 3 specific items on the agenda, Speaker. The first one is EC 2.1, the appointment of the city's Poet Laureate. I'd like to, first of all, thank Ann Michaels for her great work here as the Poet Laureate, and to welcome Mr. Al Morantz, who hopefully Council will confirm today as the new Poet Laureate going forward. Additionally, Speaker, item EC 2.3, which is the harmonized bylaw and fees for sidewalk, cafes, parklets, and also marketing display. For the last 21 years, this city has had essentially, although we're one city, a bylaw that has been not uniformed and, in fact, has been of great challenge to many of the businesses in the city with respect to the cost for fees, the licensing, and so on. It has not been working well. It has had a number of challenges for residents as well in terms of navigating our sidewalks. And I want to thank the staff for bringing this report forward, because this report has taken essentially 5 years. There's been a tremendous amount of public participation and so on at committee. A week or so ago, a large number of members of the CNIBC and others who came in to talk in support of this report, to talk about the impact that the lack of this harmonized bylaw has had, the impact that it's actually had on them, as well as businesses that has come forward seeking more uniformity and consistency, as well as, Speaker, most of this bylaw currently now affects the downtown core. The suburban areas and so on have not actually had the ability to really participate in this particular process. So in essence now this uniformity will in fact reach out into the suburban areas. And then finally, Speaker, I want to highlight 4 members of council as it relates to the homelessness issue in this city. The item C, EDC 2.10, which is the implementation of Reaching Homes. It's a Canadian government homeless strategy that seeks to allows for the participation, and this report talks about an agreement with respect to shelter support and housing administration to enter into agreement with Employment and Social Development Canada so that resources can be brought in to help us with respect to the varying challenges that we have on a daily basis here in the City of Toronto. Particularly, though, I wanted to highlight for members recommendation number 7 with respect to focusing on utilizing shelter and support and housing administration to develop an Indigenous plan for funding stream in partnership with the local Indigenous community and so on. I think this is extremely important. This is an area where we have a tremendous amount of challenge. Resources are being applied to obviously aid and assist this important area. Those are all the points I wanted to make this morning on these particular issues, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ainsley, you have a motion to introduce the General Government and Licensing Committee report.
I do. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The report for meeting number 2 of the General Government and Licensing Committee listed on the agenda of Council be presented for consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Pasternak, you have a motion to introduce the Infrastructure and Environment Committee report.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That the report for meeting 2 of the Infrastructure and Environment Committee listed on the agenda of Council be presented for consideration. I would just bring your attention to the street closures listed in the agenda, some procurement issues, and a couple of matters of litigation over current and past subcontractors. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Bailao, you have a motion to introduce the Planning and Housing Committee report.
Yep. That the report from Meeting 3 of the Planning and Housing Committee listed on the agenda of Council be presented for consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Grimes, you have a motion to introduce the Etobicoke York Community Council report.
Yes, I do, Madam Speaker, and good morning. That the report from Meeting 4 of the Etobicoke York Community Council listed on the agenda of Council be presented for consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Pasternak, you have a motion to introduce the North York Community Council report.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. That the report from Meeting 4 of the North York Community Council listed on the agenda of Council be presented for consideration.
Thank you. Councillor McKelvey, you have a motion to introduce the Scarborough Community Council report.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. That the report from Meeting 4 of the Scarborough Community Council listed on the agenda of Council be presented for consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Perks, you have a motion to introduce the Toronto and East York Community Council report.
Good morning, Speaker. I move that the report of Meeting 4 of the Toronto East York Community Council listed on the agenda of Council be presented for consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Ford, you have a motion to introduce the new business from city officials.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning, everyone. That new business from city officials listed on the agenda of Council be presented for consideration.
Thank you. All those in favor of the motions, recorded vote.
Deputy Mayor Min Wong, please.
The motion to introduce the reports carries unanimously, 23 in favor.
Thank you. Members of Council, before I ask for declared interest, I wish to remind you again about the requirement to make both a verbal and written declaration of interest at the meeting. I encourage members to bring their completed forms to meetings to hand to the clerk. If you need a blank form, the clerk's staff have copies available. Are there any declarations of interest? Please put your name up. Request to question staff. Councillor Bradford.
Thanks very much, Speaker. I'd like to declare a conflict on item TE 4.44. My wife is a planner on this file.
Okay. Thank you. Well, what's the nature of your...
The nature of my interest is as follows. My wife is a planner on the file.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further declarations? No. Members, I will now review the order paper. The mayor... Yes, Councillor Ainsley?
Sorry, I just want to make a quick announcement. I know Mayor Tory will be interested in this. We don't celebrate this day. I would just like to acknowledge on this day in 1834 that our first mayor, William Lyon Mackenzie, assumed office. So I thought the mayor and everybody would be interested in that. And just wanted to remind everybody about this day. Thank you.
Member, Councillor Cressy.
Just on a point of personal privilege to follow up with that, I would like to note that the rebel mayor, whose anniversary we're celebrating today, has a portrait framed in the mayor's office of Don Pete. And so the rebel mayor in Don Pete's office.
Councillor Cole.
And can I mention that the historic Montgomery's Tavern, where the rebel mayor led the rebellion, is now going to be restored and made into a historic site at the corner of Montgomery Avenue and Yonge Street.
Yay. Okay. Members, I will now review the order paper. The mayor has designated item EX 3.1 headed engagement with the province on Toronto Transit System first quarter 2019 status report and is key matter for this meeting. That item will be our first item of business today. I propose that item EX 3.12 headed Save Our Subway, ensuring Torontonians know the facts, be considered with the mayor's key item. Mayor Tory, do you consent to the joining of this item with your key matter?
Yes, I do, Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, there are a number of other related items on the agenda that I also propose be considered together. IE 2.5, suspension of Alplas General Contractors Corporation with items. IE 2.6, litigation arising from contract MCP 1318WS for the Ellesmere Pumping Station power generators upgrade. And IE 2.7, non-competitive contract to plan group and purchase order amendment to Cole Engineering Group Limited for the completion of the Ellesmere Pumping Station power generators upgrade. And finally, items CC 5.10 and CC 5.11 regarding 280, 290 Jarvis Street, and 102 and 110 Gerard Street, and 189, 193 Mutual Street, official plan amendment and zoning amendment application. Request for direction and alterations to a designated heritage property. Amendment of a designating bylaw intention to designate under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, authority to enter into a heritage easement agreement. Notices and motions are scheduled to be dealt with at 2 p.m. tomorrow, only if the mayor's key item is completed. I propose that City Council set a time for closed sessions if required later in the meeting.
Sorry, go back to page 7, you missed petitions.
Oh, okay, I missed a page. Page 7? Oh, there is, it's missing from here.
Okay.
It's missing from here. Do we have any petitions? Sorry, okay. Councillor Matlow. Petition?
Yes. Good morning, Madam Speaker, members of council. I submit this petition from 3,868 signatories for the consideration of council.
Oh, no, it is in here.
And it's related to EX 3.12, Save Our Subway, ensuring Torontonians know the facts. And I'm just going to read out the content of the petition. So these are the signatories. And the petition reads as this. Premier Doug Ford says he's taking Toronto subway so he can get new transit built. However, nothing is stopping the province from building transit in Toronto now. Uploading the existing subway does not affect the Ford government's ability to construct and own new lines or extensions. In fact, the province is currently building and will own the Eglinton Crosstown. Moreover, it was Premier Doug Ford himself who helped kill the approved LRT plan in 2010, a move that cancelled 4 rapid transit lines, which were fully funded by the province, by the previous provincial government, and has caused years of delays to get transit built for people who need it. Doug Ford's plan isn't really about improving transit in Toronto. He should be helping Toronto invest in fact-based transit plans, such as the Relief subway line and a light rapid transit network in Scarborough. Instead, his politics-based plan is to sell off our subway lands and air rights while wasting billions of dollars on subways to Pickering, where enhancing existing GO lines would move suburban residents much faster. With Toronto subway, Ford would gain control of lucrative air rights above stations and adjacent properties owned and paid for by Torontonians. The better way would be for the TTC to utilize these public assets to invest in fact-based transit plans and work with city planners and communities to build much-needed public amenities for Toronto residents, including affordable housing, childcare, recreation space, and to have a partner in Queen's Park that invests in Toronto rather than one that sells the value of our subway to spend elsewhere, and I certainly support the signatories of this petition. Thank you.
Are there any further petitions? All in favor of receiving the petitions? Recorded vote.
Councillor Robinson, please.
The motion to receive the petition carries unanimously, 24 in favor.
The city clerk has noted the items that members wish to hold. I will now go through the items listed on the order paper to take additional holds. I will recognize requests to make matters urgent and time-specific after I go through the items for additional holds. Once the order paper has been approved by council, any change will need a 2/3 vote. Page 3. Page 3, Councillor Perks.
Thank you, Speaker. I would like to hold EX 3.5, Administrative Amendments to Reserve Fund Accounts. EX 3.5.
Councillor Robinson.
Oh, I'm sorry, madam. I changed my mind.
Okay. Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to hold EX 3.11 2019 Toronto Zoo Lumina Experience.
Councillor Wong Tam.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I don't know if I need to hold this, but I could probably dispense it with an amendment. It's EX 3.7, Delegation of Authority for Temporary Liquor Licenses. I have an amendment I could put on the screen. It is essentially to go ahead with the staff recommendations, but just to report back in 1 year with an evaluation framework.
We could hold that down. I should have.
Sure, not a problem. Thank you. I'll hold that.
Okay, so all of page 3 has been held. Point of order, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, at the Executive Committee, we had requested some information to come forward with EX 3.8. I don't see that information here in the supplementary material or any other place. I'm just wondering if that information is coming forward, because it will be helpful to me in either forming the need to ask questions or to release that item.
Okay, we'll look into it, Councillor
Thank you.
Thompson. Thank you.
Because, Michael, we don't get to hire the person.
Councillor Bailao.
On page 3, I might be able to release, I'd just like a recorded vote on item 3.6.
Okay,
if everybody's
recorded
fine with it.
On page 3, EX 3.6, recorded vote.
Councillor Crawford, please. Thank you.
The item carries unanimously, 24 in favor.
Thank you. Page 4. Page 5. Councillor Coe, if you want to speak, you have to press the button. On page 5, Councillor Carroll.
Sorry, Madam Speaker. Page 4 went by very quickly. It was page 4.
Okay.
Top of the page, audit 1.4, the demonstrating the value of the Auditor General's office.
Councillor Coe, on page 5.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to hold EC 2.8.
What's it called?
The BIA.
Business Improvement Area 2019 Operating Budgets, Report 2.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bailao.
Madam Speaker, EC 2.7, I have an amendment, and if you so wish, I would be able to release this item with that small amendment.
Does the staff have the amendment?
Yep.
Okay, if we can put the amendment on the screen. It's on page 5, EC 2.7. Okay, it's on the screen. All in favor? Carried. Item is amended. All in favor? Carried. Page 6. Councillor Holliday.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to hold IE 2.2 FG Gardner Expressway and Don Valley Parkway closure, Heart and Stroke Foundation of Ontario, and also IE 2.3 eastbound FG Gardner Expressway and northbound Don Valley Parkway closures. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
Madam Speaker, can I get a recorded vote on EY 4.5, intention to designate under Part 5, Section 29, the Ontario Heritage Act, 58 Wheatfield Road?
And what is the recommendation? To designate?
Okay, bottom of the page, EY 4.5, Councillor Ford wants a recorded vote.
The item carries 23-1.
Page 7. Councillor Cressy, page 7.
Sorry, Speaker, page 6. I would just ask for a recorded vote, and I can release on page 6, item PH 3.2, zoning revisions for municipal shelters.
Okay.
Oh, I'll continue to hold it.
All right. What's this one? Page 8. Councillor Fletcher, page 8.
Yes, I'd like to, I could hold it, or I could simply ask for a recorded vote on TE 4.16, intention to designate under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, 440 Unwin Avenue, which is the Hearn.
Would you like a recorded vote? Okay, recorded vote.
The item is adopted 23-1.
Page 9. Oh, Councillor Holliday, you had page 8?
I did, Madam Speaker. I just wanted a recorded vote on TE 4.21.
Okay, T 4.21, Councillor Holiday's asked for a recorded vote. On page 8, T 4.21, application to remove a private tree on 21 Queensdale Avenue.
The item carries 21-3.
Page 9. Councillor Wong Tam.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to hold CC 5.2, Ombudsman Toronto Report, Toronto Community Housing Corporation's Medical and Safety at Risk Transfer Process for Tenants.
Yes. That's because the screen... No, that's because your name was there for the previous page. Yes, I know, and that's why you can't put your name back up. So let's, okay, we're on page 9. If we can clear the screen, please, so this allows Councillor Fletcher to put their name up. And Councillor Fillion was next. Okay, Councillor Fillion, you want to put your name? Okay, Councillor Fletcher, and then Councillor Fillion, if you can put your name up there. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. Councillor Wong-Tam beat me to the punch there for 5.2. I'm going to hold 5.1 and 5.5.
Councillor Fillion.
I can release CC 5.3.
Oh, no, I got questions.
Okay, well, you hold it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll hold it.
You'll hold it? Okay. Page 10. Councillor Wong-Tam.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This is regarding CC 5.10 as well as CC 5.11. I could probably move a motion and have the item dealt with right now rather than hold it. There's confidential staff reports. I see the clerks are nodding. They agree with that strategy. There are confidential staff report from the city solicitor regarding a Ontario Municipal Board,
Okay,
LPAT.
Hold on, let's do it one at a time.
Sure.
Does the staff have the motion? Okay, so you're the two of them together. So can you put the screen and the motion on the screen, please?
Okay, thank you very much. And this is a transmittal directly from the Toronto Preservation Board, and they've simply amended the recommendations of the staff, and I'm just moving the recommendations from the Preservation Board as well as the recommendations of the City Solicitor.
Okay, on favor of the amendment? Carried. Item is amended. On favor? Carried. And item 10. Just adopt CC 5.10. On favor? Carried. Okay, so that's it. Page 10. Now we'll Councillor Ford.
Yes, Madam Speaker. I would just like to ask Council's indulgence to reopen on page 8, TE 4.16, intention to designate under Part 5, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, 440 Unwin Avenue. I'd just like to remain consistent on this, and I made a mistake.
I'll move to reopen.
You made a mistake last time.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. What I
Remain consistent.
I'm sorry. What item? What item is it? C 4.16.
The Hearn. The Hearn.
Okay, to reopen. On favor? Carried. Now you want a recorded vote?
Yes, please. Thank you very much.
A recorded vote.
The item is adopted 22-2.
Thank you. I will now consider request to make items urgent and time specific. Councillor Layton?
Yes, thank you very much. My request was actually going to be to withdraw an item on page 12, MM 5.10, authorization to release Section 37 funds. My understanding is the community group has already raised the funds and don't need them anymore. Page 12, MM 5.10, authorization to release Section 37.
So you want to withdraw that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So that's on page 12, MM 5.10. Councillor Layton is asking to withdraw. Members' motion on favor, carried. Councillor Holliday.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I request Council's indulgence to time specific on page 6, item PH 3.1 as of right zoning for secondary suites. I'd like to consider that as the first item immediately following notices of motion.
Okay, so that's PH 3.1, correct? Correct?
Yes,
Yes.
thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay, so following members' motions tomorrow?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay, motion by Councillor Holliday on PH 3.1 that we deal with the item following the members' motions tomorrow. All in favor? Carried. Councillor Fillion.
I would like to make time-specific CC 5.4, Office of the, page 9, Office of the Integrity Commissioner Annual Report. I was going to pick the same time slot as Councillor Holliday, but so I'll make it immediately following that item.
Okay, all in favor? Carried. Councillor Ainsley.
Yes, Madam Speaker, on the first page, EX 3.11, 2019 Toronto Zoo Lumina experience. Could I make this the first item tomorrow morning after we vet the agenda? I'm asking for this so staff have an idea of what time they can get here from Scarborough.
Yeah, well, you've held the item down, so you want staff to be here to ask questions?
Yes.
Okay, first item tomorrow morning. All in favor? Carried. Well, we're running out of time. Councillor Wong Tam.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to time CC 5.1 and CC...
what
Oh,
page?
sorry, it's page 9, Madam Speaker. CC 5.1, CC 5.2, both items from the Ombudsman. If I can time that as the third item on the second day after the member's motion. Thank you.
All in favor? Carried. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you.
Councillor Carroll.
Madam Speaker, it's not, I don't know if you want to treat it as time specific, but on page 4, CA 4.1, I've had an opportunity to review some of the information that is confidential that I will want to discuss, so you will have to find time for confidential.
On page 4, the audit committee, the audit?
No, CA, the civic appointments, 4.1. I will want to discuss some of the private information that I've seen.
We'll find a time.
Thanks.
If we have any time. I think we should start working on Friday now.
Friday.
Oh, it's entirely possible.
Speaker?
Pardon? No, what I'm saying is that Councillor Carroll said she wants to make that time specific, and we suggested we do all the in-camera items at a later time. Yeah. And we go in-camera for all the in-camera items. Yeah. No. I'm just saying any more time specifics will probably be going to Friday. Yeah.
Madam Speaker, just on a mild point, accurately reflect my request. I was simply indicating that I will need to go into camera. I leave when you want to do that up to your own good office.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I did indicate when
My microphone, please.
When I first started that we will deal with the in-camera items
Correct.
later today.
Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor of adopting the order paper? Oh, Councillor Perks?
Yeah, now that we don't schedule an in-camera for 6 o'clock anymore, I guess it's incumbent on me to notify you that I need to go in camera on CA 4.1, the appointment of members, 4.2, appointment of a public member to the Toronto Public Library Board.
Okay. Yeah, that's a confidential. They're all of them are they're being held down and they're confidential, so we'll have to go in camera on all of them. Yeah.
My microphone, Speaker?
Yeah. All those in favor of adopting the order paper? And items not held, recorded vote.
Councillors Layton and Cressy, please. Councillor Matlow, please.
Councillor Fillion, Councillor Perks, Deputy Mayor Min Wong, Councillor Pasternak, please.
The motion to adopt the order paper and items not held carries unanimously, 24 in favor.
Members of council, I want to stress the importance of preparing your motions in advance. The clerk staff are here to help you prepare your motions. In particular, if you intend to move a motion during the release of holds, I will insist that your motion be prepared in advance and given to the clerk. If you do not have your motion ready, I will not recognize you. I'm also reminding members that you must state your motion first before you speak to it. Members, City Council follows the routine for the processing and adding of any motions without notice during the meeting. Please remember that a motion without notice must include a reason for urgency. If you have an urgent motion without notice you wish to bring forward at this meeting, please give your motion to the City Clerk staff. They will prepare the necessary procedure motion for my review along with your motions. The Chair must agree the motion is urgent before you can seek leave to introduce it at this meeting. It will require 18 votes to add a motion without notice to the agenda during the meeting. Motions added to the agenda in this way are not subject to a vote to waive referral to a committee or agency. I will be reviewing all motions carefully and will advise council after each recess which motions need a motion to add to the agenda. We will now go to the mayor's key item, which is on page 3, EX 3.1 and EX 3.12. So, questions to staff? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. To the City Manager, clearly as a City Council, we are well aware that residents want action on transit in this city. So what we have before us now, as of last night, how does this impact transit expansion in our city? Does it accelerate it? Does it delay it? Can you give us a motherhood answer on that?
So if I can, through the Speaker, what it provides you is, I think for the first time in a number of months where we've been asking for specifics in writing, we've been given those specifics. And so it's now incumbent upon the table that you approved and that I recommend we continue having a membership at, that we go through and understand better how those items can be implemented. So in terms of what does it do in terms of timelines, certainly, this is something that we want to get into in specifics in our next report, which is coming to Executive Committee on the 9th. But however, certainly if I look at Scarborough, adding stations does change our schedule. How much, I can't tell you exactly. It really depends on the nature of the design items that they have in mind. So, but again, the purpose of our table was to talk about specifics and to negotiate how those specifics can be implemented, recognizing that we need to do this as well, engaging our community in some meaningful way.
Okay, thank you very much. And to TTC staff, does this change the scope, impact design? My understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it takes 2 years to design a station. Could you just give us a little bit, Council, a little bit of input on that, those questions?
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, when you're it really depends where they're going to put the two stops. Until we understand that, it's very difficult to actually put a timescale and cost against it. So we need to sit down with the province and define the scope. And then once we've defined the scope, then we can look at the impact.
Okay, and then I don't know who this should be directed to, this question, but I guess I'm always concerned about sunk costs and the money that's been invested to date on design and work that we've done as a city, and how we've been charging ahead, particularly on the relief line, accelerating that work by at least 2 years, if not maybe 3. How are we impacted fiscally related to sunk costs?
So if I can, I'll start, and if Rick wants to add, of course, do that. So through the Speaker, certainly we've been advancing well into detailed design, the Line 2 extension into Scarborough. Seeing now what it is that the province has in mind will affect, as I think our TTC representative, will affect the design that we've been evolving. So again, there are considerable dollars that have been sunk into that design. As you can imagine, going from a concept to something that's ready for market requires a lot of investment of energy and money. So there will certainly be an effect on the money that we have spent, because it does represent, and again, I want to be careful because I don't know the specifics at this point in time, but it will represent a need for us to take a step back and revisit all the work that we've done to this moment in time.
Okay, and just as a big advocate of the relief line for many years, I wonder how you interpret the definition or the language around that freestanding and the reference to state-of-the-art technology, etc. Can you expand on that at all for us?
Sure. So, I mean, as you well know, we've been engaged with Metrolinx for some time in terms of the evolution of that design. I must tell you that the idea that we're now seeing in writing was communicated to us, I believe, in February 14th. In terms of specifics, what does this new approach mean? We're not certain at all on that. We want to see what the concept is. I just want to add, though, if I can, and on the 9th of March, we did have a meeting where we presented all of the transit works that we are engaged in at the City of Toronto, not just the subway works, so that there was a clear understanding by our counterparts from the province and Metrolinx as to the status of all that works and where they are in design and where they are in schedule. So that's the kind of information we presented on the 9th, so that they had a good idea of how we're evolving things. And then that's what we want to bring back to you in about a week's time in some detail as to just exactly what the status of our transit expansion work and revitalization work amounts to.
And then I would ask, my understanding in the media this morning, the minister talked about this being negotiable. Is that your impression, or you're more involved than anybody? What's your take on that comment?
I take it as for what exactly it is. I mean, this is the whole purpose of our table, is to understand each other's positions, if you will, and to try and find a way in which to move forward as quickly as we can with the needed investments in transit expansion, as well as doing the important work that we have to do to kind of maintain our existing system. So I look forward to the details as we've been sharing with the province, what it is specifically they have in mind. So that way we'll be better informed to come back here and tell you what the consequences are.
Okay, thank you for your answers.
Thank you. Councillor Ford, questions?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I would like to start off with my questions to the City Manager. Even in the last 24 hours, we've heard a lot of comments in the media, on social media, really more on the opposing side of this, supplementary report. Would you consider your discussions to date with the province of Ontario to be in bad faith?
Through the Speaker, no.
Should Torontonians be terribly alarmed by discussions that are currently taking place with the province, in your opinion?
Terribly alarmed? I think to the extent that they don't know all the details, and so they want to understand the badly needed investments, how they're going to be made, what impact that will have on them. To be honest, I mean, we wake up every day and our viewpoint are to those riders that experience the significant congestion that they see right now on the system, and they want to know how we're going to resolve that. And they want to know as well how it is that we're going to expand the transit network in order to accommodate the 1 million people that are going to be here in 20 years. So we are looking at both, obviously. So alarmed only to the extent that I'm sure they would like to know more detail, and they want to hear from us as to, how is it they're going to benefit them and how it affects their day-to-day life.
And thank you for your answer, Mr. City Manager, on that. But I'd like to elaborate. So we want to know more. How do we get to that? Would the best approach be throwing your hands up and walking away and trying to fight the province? Or would it be constructive dialogue and working with the province of Ontario? What would your recommendation be?
Well, my answer to your question is the answer I would give you know, as a city manager, whether I was here or I was in Hamilton, anywhere else. I mean, I'm here to provide you the best advice possible on each and every item that comes in, across my table. So I take a very objective view of the matter. At the end of the day, all I know is that there is badly needed transit investments that need to occur. I say that as not just as a city manager, but as someone that is passionate about how we build cities. So I, you know, again, these things are typically negotiated. I've been involved in a lot of different infrastructure projects over my years, and ideas get expressed, and then people sit at a table and work through those ideas to try and make sure they're done as effectively as possible.
With the letter that came through from Michael Lindsay and the government, is there anything in that letter, and of course more discussions have to be happened, or have to happen, but is there anything that's being taken away in their priorities, or has City Council deemed these projects as priorities? From what I take, but I'm going to let you answer, is they're actually adding infrastructure. Is that not correct?
Well, through the Speaker, I mean, they're certainly making clear what their interests are and what they're prepared to invest in. And so that's something we've been asking for in writing, and so we certainly have that. But again, I come back to, I want to say this in terms of the letter we received on Friday. Of course, we reviewed it, and over the weekend, staff did go through each of the items in those letters, in that letter, which did result in a meeting with Michael Lindsay and the Deputy Minister of Transportation on Monday at 5 o'clock, where we went through some of the concerns we had and the tone, I guess, and the content of what that letter on Friday amounted to, which I think is what triggered the subsequent letter that came yesterday. You know, if I take issue with anything right now in terms of what it is that you have in front of you, is the comment that was made about the escalating costs of, and they combine both the Scarborough as well as the Relief Line project. So we do still to this point in time feel it's necessary to give you some clarity on that, and if you wish, I'd be happy to do that in concert with Rick Leary.
Just while I have one more question left. I would like to bring it local into the city's northwest. And actually, I could mention Scarborough in both of these, but were staff not directed by City Council in terms of the Eglinton West LRT to look at tunneling as an option? So that's never been off the table. And have staff ever looked at a 3-stop subway in Scarborough?
That was your last question.
Thank you very much.
So I'm going to give you a very good answer. I'm going to turn to my left over here. Karen, if you could just give the details on that, please.
Through the Speaker, yes, tunneled options have been looked at extensively as part of the ongoing work on the Eglinton West LRT. And several reports have actually been to Council that suggested that an at-grade LRT is a preferred solution. There's further analysis that was done on this again and is actually coming forward to Council on April 16th and will be public next week. Greg,
thank you. Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Through you to the City Manager. Mr. Murray, I'm trying to understand, so the letter specifically mentions 4 projects. As Councillor from Eastern Scarborough, I'm trying to understand where the Eglinton East LRT project fits into all of this.
So through the Speaker, that was clearly presented on March 9th when we had our meeting with both Michael Lindsay and Metrolinx and MTO. It was important for us to lay out all the projects, understanding the importance of all the projects, where they are in terms of design, where they are in terms of schedule. So that information was clearly provided to them. We will be documenting that in the report that Karen just mentioned that's coming out and will be in front of executive on the 9th. So they have that information. Certainly it's important to us. But right now the discussion or the focus of the provincial government is on subways.
Okay. Was there any response to them when you presented that information? It was just, we'll look at it and get back to you? Because I am concerned over, so the funding that's structured now for the extension of the Scarborough subway and the Eglinton East LRT up to UTSC, as most people know, it's one pot of money, a good chunk of it, $1.9 billion, I believe. You can correct me if I'm wrong, indexed to inflation. that we're expecting from the province. So I'm quite concerned we're going to see all that, hypothetically, subway gets uploaded, they take that money, and we're back to the drawing board after a lot of work on the Eglinton East LRT.
Well, if I can through the speaker, I think that was in part the reason why we want to show them the entire picture, so that they had an appreciation of why it is that when we wake up every day, we're focused on not just subways, but and the relief of the congestion that we see here today, but also kind of those transit investments that allow us to grow the city in the manner in which we want. So that information, and I think it was, as noted in I think the first letter that they sent to us on Friday, that it was quite informative. Whether or not it becomes a conversation further on down the road, I'm not going to speculate. But right now, as you can see from their letters, that they're very much focused on subways, and what that means from a funding standpoint is certainly something that we're wanting to talk to them about. So we have federal funding in the form of about $4.9 billion, some of which has already been earmarked. We want to make sure that the City of Toronto and the Province of Ontario can somehow get on a page where the funding priorities aren't just one-sided.
Okay. And my next question, Mr. Murray, I wanted to ask about same vein along the Scarborough subway extension and the LRT. A lot of work's been done today. We've had lots of meetings. I assume on your list of things to be discussed is cost recovery of what the city spent so far on those projects?
That would be a very logical thing for us to talk about.
Excellent. And the next question was around similar vein, was around the gas tax. Last year, provincially and federally, we got about $300 million, I believe, in gas tax money. Through these projects being done, if they end up getting uploaded, are we going to see an offset for that money, or?
If I can, through the speaker, we have not had any kind of robust discussions about revenue sources, if they're impacted and what can be done to mitigate those impacts. So, but just so as you know, it's certainly on our radar. It's something that we would want to have a fulsome discussion with, and not just gas tax. I mean, there's other revenue sources that we want to be very clear on. And obviously get in writing and have a firm commitment from the province as to how they see moving forward, and whether or not it in fact affects those kinds of revenues.
Okay. And then just my last question, Mr. Murray, I don't know if it gets answered by you or not. It was more about add-on costs, and one of the examples I want to use in the one letter where it talks about the extension into Scarborough, there's a vague reference to the terminus north of the Scarborough Town Centre. I know there's some issues around our subway fleet and how we're going to manage that. When those costs come up, is that, or lack of a better word, I'm going to use add-on, and where that would get dealt with in the negotiations?
Through the speaker, I think you did a great job of summarizing the exact issues that we need to address at our table and get some firm answers in terms of what does this do to budgets, what does this do to monies that we've already sunk, what does this do to our timeline, but that's exactly why the table was set.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Murray. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Councillor Bradford.
Thanks very much. Through the speaker to the city manager, how long have we been planning in the planning stages of the relief line now?
I'm going to ask one of our staff here to give you Karen or James, either way, or
through the speaker, 2014.
2014, so 5 years now. To the city manager, it was concerning when we saw the letter come out that said the costs have doubled, because that was new information, of course. Perhaps not factually correct information, but that was news to everybody here at council. Can you confirm whether or not the costs of the relief line have doubled?
Well, again, I think the way that the actual statement was structured, it combined both Scarborough Extension and the relief line. And so those are two very different projects. One is well advanced in design, and the other one is in early design, if you will. Regrettably, they said it the way they said it. And it's one issue that we have, not with the letter we received on Friday, but the letter we received yesterday. So I'm going to actually turn it over to the TTC to tell you about the numbers as to where we're at and why we have some concerns with that blanket statement.
Through the Speaker, if we talk about the Scarborough subway extension first, we've actually got to a stage now where we've actually provided and got feedback on our design. We've done 30%, we've taken the estimate at that point in time, we've actually done the estimate in-house, we've actually went to a third party, to a internationally commercially recognised consultant to get the cost and the schedule verified. That will then be released next week as part of our Stage Gate 3 report and going to Council in April of this year. The costs will be in line with what we actually stated previously in March 2017 when you take the base cost, the schedule and the cost risk analysis into consideration.
So we've advanced to 30% design. We have a much more fulsome cost estimate of Line 2 extension. It was 3.34 billion roughly previously, and so we're not going to see a number next week that's going to come back double, like at 6 billion.
If you actually go back to the Council report in March 2017, there was a base cost and a budget was there for 3.56 billion. Also, there were options within that for risk and schedule risk analysis and public realm work. When you actually total them up, there was actually about 3.9 billion.
Okay, thank you. To the City Manager, the March 22nd letter, it was very ambiguous around the status of the relief line. That was, of course, concerning. They say that they want to see the planning and design work for the Yonge subway extension to progress in parallel with the relief line. That might be their priority, but that's not our priority. So I want, the relief line's past the TPAF stage, and we're working on preliminary design up to 30%. Do you have any indication of if bringing the relief line and the Yonge subway extension in parallel would mean slowing down the relief line?
I mean, they're really at two different stages of design. I think just, if I can, in terms of your question, I mean, we've been very clear about the, if there's an order to these projects, that the Yonge extension would not be a first priority, and for the simple reason that you have significant congestion in the system as we speak. So we have been very clear about all the projects that help to remedy the congestion should really be the priority. So relief line to us, along with Yonge Bloor Station, along with Smart Track, along with Scarborough, if you were to look at the collection of those projects, those are the ones that give us some opportunity, if you will, to address some of the congestion issues that we think are important. So I just want to be very clear that the extension should be a second order priority. In terms of combining those two things, we're working on both those projects right now, so if we're allowed to continue doing what we're doing, I can't see that there would be an impact, although I'm happy to be wrong and corrected by any member of staff.
So in a sense, said another way, City Council's priority is not advancing projects that will add to the congestion first. It's actually advancing projects that will alleviate the congestion, like the relief line.
Correct.
Okay. Last question. The supplementary report that you released yesterday identified a number of errors on the March 22nd, including an overstating of the cost on our proposed projects. Has the province given you any explanation why these very basic errors were made on their end?
That was your last question?
So again, I mean, I don't want to split words here, but I mean, these are clarifications that we were asking for, and so, we want to go back. We want to get back to the table and again, go through all the work that's been done on the relief line, on Scarborough, and review with them the numbers, where they're at right now. In the case of the relief line, we're not so advanced in design that you could say you have anything even close to market ready. So, I mean, rather than saying cost, I'd almost call them estimates. So, and I think that's something that's really important to confirm in the community so that they understand what these numbers really mean, and that we don't make sometimes these blanket statements that I think lead people to wrong conclusions.
Thank you. Before we continue, I'd like to welcome the grade 5 students from the Toronto Heschel School located in Ward 6, York Centre. Their local counselor is Counselor James Pasternak, and their group leader is Marissa Unruh. Welcome. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you very much. I just want to establish that the TPAP has been completed for the relief line, and that was a number of years in the making.
Yes, through the Speaker, that's correct. It was approved by the province in the fall of
Approved by the province in
the fall
of 2018. So
That's
last fall, the PTAP was approved. It allowed us to go to 30% design for the relief line, and that is
That's the process that's currently underway.
currently underway. And do we have a, thank you. So in order to change anything significantly, we would have to go back again, or there would still have to be another environmental assessment, should it be changed as radically as is outlined in the letter from Mr. Lindsay?
Yes, depending on what they have in mind, that would involve going back through the process again.
Right. So currently the relief line is attached to line 2, and the design shows it arriving, Pape Station. There's a number of configurations, but it has an attachment to line 2. Would I be correct in saying that? I believe I am.
That is correct.
It's attached to line 2. And also the province is suggesting that we would extend, add 3 stations instead of 1 on the Scarborough extension, which is essentially a line 2 extension.
Through the Speaker, that's correct.
However, in the letter, it appears that the relief line will no longer be aligned with line 2. It's called old technology or outdated technology for line 2. Did I read that right? My time.
Yes, that is how it was written, but we don't believe that is true.
So the fact is, though, they're suggesting a different type of line rather than one that would be in conformity with line 2. That's how I read the letter. Did you read it like that?
That's how I read the letter, but I don't have any specifics about their new technology.
So could you just outline, someone from the TTC, how important it is to have rolling stock that is movable throughout the entire system rather than one type of train here on a gauge and another type of train on another gauge? Is that an important factor for our system as a whole? And
Through you, Chair, that's correct. It's very important to be able to move trains from one line to another like we do today on line 1 and line 2. The intent of the relief line is to use Greenwood Yard, so we would be able to shift the trains over from the relief line.
Just the intent of the relief line is to use Greenwood Yard. And how many trains are there in the Greenwood Yard parked there, starting and stopping from the Greenwood Yard?
There's about 50 today.
50 at a time. And so the idea is that that exists. That's one of the reasons why it's close to Pape, and you would be able to take those trains up and put them in service on the relief line. This notion that there needs to be a different technology, a different type of vehicle, gauge, I'm assuming everything, would not allow the trains that are next door to be used on the relief line. So
That is correct.
and there'd have to be a different yard, am I right?
That is correct. Unfortunately,
Why don't you just stay up?
All right,
I'll
well,
ask you
thank
all
you. We don't have enough information for them at this time, but you are correct.
But reasonably, if you're using a different kind of train, rather than the one that we're using on line 2, then you would have to find somewhere to park all of those that would be on the relief line. And I believe the letter says it would be a whole new line that would run all around the city. So you've not heard about that before outside of this particular. Okay, so will that be something, I guess, that would be in discussion with the province as far as the importance of uniformity and rolling stock being comparable across all of our lines?
That would be an obvious discussion point.
Uh-huh. And the other one is basically how much time will that, let's say we change that whole thing on the relief line to a different stock, a different gauge, a different everything. We would have to go back to 0 on the TPAP. The current TPAP is for the subway that starts at Greenwood Station, goes to Pape, and would be used on the relief line. And the gauge and everything is built for that.
It's through the Speaker, it's very difficult to speculate, but we do have a TPAP that approves station locations. It improves a route connection from Osgood out to Pape, premised on many of the characteristics that have been outlined in your questions.
So
going
it
back,
approved everything, it approved the
It's a
width of the
package.
tunnel, it approved where the tracks are, it approved the depth, it approved all of those things.
it's a package to a certain level of design.
That was your
would
last
have to
question.
be completely reevaluated to understand what approval process you would begin to
My question
reset.
was timelines to do that.
Thank you.
Timelines to do that, I would argue, would be significant.
Thank you. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the city manager, in your discussions with the provincial officials, are you getting the impression that they're no longer talking about uploading? That all of a sudden their priorities seem to be not uploading, but basically building these 4 lines?
Through the speaker.
I thought the discussion was going to be, the table was about uploading scenarios.
Through the speaker, I believe both discussions are going to occur. The uploading has not gone away. We are providing them information to assist with that kind of decision, but I think what they're wanting to do is, to the extent possible, advance expansion as well. So we're working on really kind of 2 different paths, but both at the same time.
Has there been face-to-face discussions about the complexities of uploading and the cost of the state of good repair, and would they take that over? Have those discussions taken place?
Through the speaker, I mean, those discussions have started. There are certainly a number of complications around the accounting practices that are going to be deployed. You know, I don't see an answer to the uploading occurring anytime soon. Given the complexity of it and the kind of information sharing and the ultimate decision, I don't see it as something that we're going to resolve in 2019 by any stretch. Exactly how much time it will take, I can't speculate, but it's not a quick conversation.
But their priorities seem to be these 4 lines and getting them built.
Through the chair, speaker, that I think is true.
Yes, I just have a question of the TTC staff. I just want to follow up on what Councillor Fletcher was talking about. In terms of this bizarre reference about the relief line south, they talk about the new mystery technology that they're going to use. Have they mentioned what the mystery technology is? Is it going to be maglev? Is it going to be RT2, linear induction motors? Have they given an indication what the mystery new line is going to be using?
Through you, Chair, they have not given us any specifics whatsoever regarding what the new technology is.
Did you ask what the magical technology is going to be that's going to run through the middle of the city that is supposedly much better than, as they say, the outdated technology of Line 2 that is not adequate, obviously, according to them?
Of course, you know, they talk about different elevations, they talk about a lighter train, the slope and the taper of the rail, but no specifics
So they're
whatsoever.
talking about maglev technology, obviously. It's something that's elevated. What else would it be?
Not sure, to be honest with you.
So they wouldn't give an indication because they obviously have something in mind, and why wouldn't they tell you what the technology is going to be? And where, as Councillor Fletcher said, where would the new yard have to be? You'd have to train hundreds of new engineers and technology people to deal with this magical technology. Did you ask him about that?
Yeah, we've asked those specific questions a number of times, and we've got no answer.
No answer. And what about why is the existing subway system, as they describe in Line 2, technologically outdated? Is that what the, I guess, the norm is in the rest of North America or wherever in Europe where they're using this outdated technology? Do you agree that the technology on our existing subway is technologically outdated and should be abandoned because they're obviously wanting us to switch to the magical, mythical elevation they're going to run through Toronto?
I believe the product in which we're proposing is a sound, proven technology that will work just fine in this city as a subway.
And how would they, did you ask them how they would basically interchange? Because, you know, one of the strong features about the Toronto system it is transparently interchangeable between the different subways and streetcars. How would you have this magical elevated line interact with the existing heavy rail traditional Toronto subway?
Again, we need more specifics from them.
Would there be helicopters, or what would it do? Elevated?
There's been no clarification on their part on what they're proposing.
So then they won't divulge this magical technology they think is much better than existing subway technology.
That was your last question.
That is correct.
Thank you. Councillor Matlow.
I understand that a report is planned for next week to tell Council the current costs of the one-stop Scarborough subway proposal. Given the context of what we're debating today, I would appreciate if staff would share with the public and Council what the current costs are of that plan.
If I can, through the Speaker, I think we have, but maybe we can repeat it again.
The current projected costs is $3.9 billion, just shy of $3.9 billion.
3.9 million, and billion rather, excuse me. And how long have you been aware of those costs? Because we were told before the election that it was 3.35.
Through the chair, again, we've just finished the estimate. We actually had the third-party verification completed at the beginning of this month. So therefore, that's allowed us to formalise it, to put it into the report for the April report.
And have we? Is that fully funded? Do we have all the funds allocated and designated for covering $3.9 billion for the one-stop subway?
Through the chair, we have funding that was approved by Council back in 2013 to fund infrastructure estimated at that time of $3.56 billion.
Okay, so there's a few $1 million that we don't know where the money is going to come from yet. Premier Ford has said that he wants to add 2 stops, and he and his minister have announced that it's going to be, to paraphrase, the private industry that's going to end up paying for those 2 stops. What is our position on whether or not that is feasible or realistic?
If I can, through the Speaker, we have no evidence one way or another whether or not the private sector would pick up those costs.
Can we point to another city in the Western world that has been successful in having a private company pay for 2 subway stops in an inner suburban area?
I'm off the top in the Western Hemisphere. No, I'm not aware of any.
Aside from perhaps a communist country, but
I think safe to say in the order of magnitude of stations that are $200, $300, $400 million to build. Right. In the context of that amount of money, it would have to be a very significant development to even begin to contribute to that scale of station development.
You don't see it as realistic based on the evidence that you've seen?
In my experience, I'd be happy to revisit that if I was shown that information.
You're very diplomatic, Greg. The relief line, if we start, if they start making significant changes to the work that's already been done at the preliminary stage, do we have any sense, even with the information we have, whether or not this let's say, could result in significant delays to actually building the line?
Through the Speaker, until we actually understand the scheme they're presenting, it's very hard to make that judgment at this point in time.
So we don't really know what they mean yet?
No.
Okay. Now, given that they want to spend potentially hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, tunneling, and what I understand is unnecessarily tunneling the Eglinton West line, are there other priorities that, like based on facts, based on actual priorities, that we would prefer to see those funds go to? I'll give you an example. The Eglinton East LRT, the Waterfront LRT, perhaps there's others. Do we have a list of priorities based on evidence and real need that we would prefer the province to invest in?
As the city manager previously indicated, there's a bundle of priorities the Scarborough extension that replaces the RT, the smart track stations, the relief line, and all of the work needed at Yonge and Bloor. All of those, that as a bundle is our priority because it deals with the congestion in the system and the health and safety of the employees and the customers in the system.
What's a higher priority, an LRT along the waterfront or burying the Eglinton West?
The second tranche that the city manager referred to are the Eglinton East, the Eglinton West, and the waterfront package of improvements that council's considered. That's the second tranche.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McKelvey.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My first question is about what is coming to Council next month in April. What will this report be covering for transit? What will we see in it?
So if I can, I'll start and where we refer to it as staff as the Omnibus Transit Report. We want to give you a very up-to-date snapshot of all the major transit projects that we've been working on, understand where we're at in terms of their design, where we are in terms of their schedule, where we are with respect to funding. Now that we have some information from the province, we're going to obviously be working to incorporate that into this report. So our goal here is to give you a very clear picture, as well as where we need some support from you to continue working on certain aspects of this range of projects. We're going to be asking you for some decisions and some support to continue on some of these projects.
And what are the timelines for this negotiation with the province? Like, when is this supposed to be wrapped up?
The way I think we first heard about it through the speaker was it was a phased approach that they were talking about. So the first phase was to look at the concept of uploading, and as well in that we were going to be looking at subway extensions. Once that first phase was done, certainly from an upload standpoint, we would get into the practical or the legal work that would be necessary in order to execute an upload if in fact that's where we landed. So there was no real hard, fast month, year established from the get-go.
So all of this information that you're presenting next month will be carried forward into this negotiation process. So we'll have up-to-date information on costs, schedule, status of procurement that will be shared with the province so that through this negotiation we can look at what any implications might happen, for example, to timelines.
Through the speaker, yes.
And then I'm a little concerned, the letter that was received from Premier Ford only mentions 4 projects. And so I'm wondering, can you clarify, is the Eglinton East LRT also part of that extension, of that discussion?
Through the speaker, so that we're clear, the letter that was received, or the one that's in front of you, was signed by Michael Lindsay and the Deputy Minister of Transportation. So it wasn't the Premier.
Okay, so from the Ontario government.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So, I mean, again, it identifies their priorities, and obviously those other projects that we presented to them back on March 9th aren't within their list of priority projects.
But they are part of the scope for this discussion. They just have not been carried forward as a priority.
We haven't heard yet their interest in those projects, the one that you just mentioned and others, but we feel obliged to make sure that they're aware of them and do everything we can at the table to discuss their importance and to see whether or not we can get support for moving forward.
So is inclusion of the Eglinton West LRT, for example, is that scope creep in this discussion? Because the original discussion was about subways.
You know, again, I can ask staff to give me a hand here, but I think, you know, you could characterize it as scope creep. I meit now seemingly is taking on more of a regional importance in terms of potential connection beyond our limits to the airport. So this is something that you know, we're hearing about and want to hear more about in terms of how it is that would be accomplished. But as I stated, I mean, we have a preference, and this new information, if you will, not that we haven't looked at you know, subsurface transit, but you know, we need more information to understand what the implications of this are.
And if through this process it's deemed that a project is not uploaded, what will be next? Like, what are the avenues that are available to us to continue moving forward on, for example, a project like the Eglinton East LRT?
Well, again, I think you know, it'll be up to us to decide whether or not or how to fund it if there is no direct involvement from the province. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's important that as the federal government's making decision on PTIF 2, that ourselves and the province, to the extent we can get on the same page, ought to be sending a consistent message to the feds in terms of how their $4.9 billion will be invested. So,
okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wong-Tam.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Given the current ridership projections in Scarborough, will the Scarborough subway extension be able to operate either a one-line or a one-stop or even a three-stop subway without subsidies?
Through the Speaker, I'm going to ask TTC to answer that question.
And then who will pay for these subsidies?
Through you, Chair, we believe it'll always require subsidies.
Okay. And has there been any indications on who will pay for those subsidies?
Not at this time.
In the letter from March 22nd from the province to our city manager and the TTC CEO, the writer claims that the TTC has not considered in any material way as part of their current design putting Eglinton Extension West, the LRT, underground. Do you agree with this statement?
Through the Speaker, we've considered that several times in the course of the analysis that we've undertaken over the last several years, including more recent consultation with the community.
And why would the writer of that letter, Mr. Lindsay, suggest something that seems so that contradicts what's actually been happening?
I believe that was clarified in the second letter where they acknowledged that we had undertaken that work.
Is there any benefit to establishing a relief line as a freestanding project from Line 2? Which is also
again, through the Speaker, notwithstanding understanding what the technology that they have in mind, that's the kind of analysis that I think we would want to undertake and provide it to you. So I don't think at this point we want to be getting ahead of ourselves.
But considering that we're actually spending millions of dollars to do the early design and planning work of the relief line, would we not have considered that if that was a logical conclusion and a benefit to designing and implementing and executing this project? Would we not have just drawn that conclusion? You've got all the experts and all the engineers put into a room. Why didn't we think of it? To separate that from the network.
Again, I think through the Speaker, I think you raise a very good point. As to if it is something that we missed, then of course we would clearly state that. Again, because we're kind of lacking in detail here, it's kind of hard to make what we would likely make as a strong argument as to what our concerns are about whatever it is they're proposing. But it's really hard to kind of make any kind of public statement about something you're not clear on.
And yet the province does that. In all your conversations and communications with the province, have they ever provided any substantial and credible information about the alternative delivery method that they reference in these letters?
Through the Speaker, the short answer is no.
And have you asked them for further explanations?
We've been asking, and not only verbally, but in writing for a range of things. And so, again, I think we're hearing more. We're getting, in part, what we've certainly have asked for was clarity on their involvement in terms of this whole upload and include it with that the extensions of our system. So, so now that we've got some detail, not a lot, it just begs a whole other series of questions that we have so that we can bring back good information to you.
Does it concern you that you are asking questions and not receiving substantial answers, and having to re-ask the question and again not get answers?
I think that's a reasonable comment, Speaker. I think, at the end of the day, everyone is, to build a good relationship, you need to, be open, and you need to, develop trust. And so trust is a two-way street, and certainly answers to important questions need to be provided. I'm not at a point where I think it's, time to kind of, fold up our tent by any stretch. I think I want to continue to work with them to continue to ask the questions and get the answers that I know you want and our community wants.
My final question is about operating costs. It costs dollars, significant dollars, to operate a system such as this. And as the province is proposing to parcel off different pieces, has there been any discussion about the operating dollars required, and who will pay for them?
Short answer is no.
Okay. And has there been any consideration on the impacts to the equality of ridership experience today as we are taking on this new conversation and exploring this new option, this new technology?
That was your last question, Councillor Wong-Tam. Thank you.
I think through the speaker, your last question and comment really speaks to the kind of evaluation that we need to do. And I think that's something that we would like to report back on once we're clear on what exactly it is that we're assessing. And as in a normal environmental assessment, there's a range of things that we are supposed to estimate in terms of impact, whether it's positive or negative. So that kind of comment you just made would be something that we would want to report back on. What is the effect at the end of the day to the rider? And is it the same, better, or worse?
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Speaker. My first question is to the City Manager. Mr. City Manager, there are two letters, one dated March the 22nd and the 26th, and it seems that the letter dated March 22nd is a correction of the March 26th letter is a correction of the 22nd. When you first received this March 22nd letter, did you or someone as part of your team reach out to the province to ask for clarification on the letter of March 22nd because you noticed inconsistencies in that letter?
Through the speaker, I mean, as you would expect, we have and you can see most of our team to my left, so we have a wide variety of skills, which that letter was shared with all of them, because before I'm going to make any call to the province or to Michael Lindsay in particular, I want to understand, obviously, our varied perspectives. We came together over the weekend. We, in fact, had a teleconference call on Sunday and went through all the issues as we saw them as individuals with a different skill set. It was only then that we had a sum total opinion as to what we thought of the first letter, which, of course, we were fortunate in that we had a meeting scheduled for the Monday, which would give us an opportunity to face-to-face to the two people that signed the letter to express all those concerns, which is what precipitated the revised letter that we received yesterday.
In the letter, the one that's dated March 22nd, it talks about a line, the Bloor Danforth line, terminating at Scarborough Town Centre. It then, in the letter dated March 22nd, it talks about a station located at Scarborough Centre. It doesn't specifically say it's the town centre, it just says Scarborough Centre. And then it also talks about the preferred three-stop position of the province. But then it goes on to say that the project would proceed north from the station at the Scarborough Centre. So I guess my question is, if it's a three-stop and one is at the Scarborough Town Centre or Centre, where would be the first stop and where would be the terminus of the third stop, since the Scarborough Centre stop would be in between? Do we know that?
So I'm going to give a two-part. So the letter of the 22nd raised those kinds of questions in our mind, which precipitated the second letter. So, but specifically to your question, if I could get someone over on my left-hand side to answer that question, that'd be appreciated.
Thank you.
We don't specifically know where, as you point out, Councillor, through the Speaker, the one station would be Scarborough Centre, second station possibly to the north at Shepherd, perhaps, an interline station perhaps at Lawrence, but we don't know specifically other than what was written in the letter.
I see. There was a question asked about subsidies to the expansion for Scarborough, Bloor Danforth line into Scarborough. The TTC is subsidized in general, is it not? Are all the lines not subsidized? Isn't the system subsidized?
That's correct, all the lines.
So then, would be Scarborough unique in terms of its need for subsidy?
No, it would not.
Okay, so Mr. City Manager, can you help me to understand, as part of the discussion I thought we were entering into, there is going to be a discussion about valuation and contributions to the city, potentially that we would be realizing funds. We have the building funds, which is the 0.5% that we've been working on for some time. Those assets or those funds would be, if we were obviously developing the city, the line with the province, would be contributed to that. If this uploading takes place, what happens to those funds and what's taking place in terms of the valuation discussion? Will the city realize funds, or will we have to contribute to the request of the province to upload the system? Will there be a dependency for funds from the City of Toronto?
So through the Speaker, I can't give you specific answers to those questions. Those are exactly the kinds of questions that we're going to have to address in the coming weeks and months.
Okay, thank you, Speaker. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Through you, Madam Speaker, to the City Manager. So the letter says that there's discussions concerning the distribution and responsibilities of expansion of projects, and then the Discover exercise concerning the value and condition of the existing subway network. Where are we having the conversation about the network and the impact that whatever action we take is going to have on the network?
Through the Speaker, as I think we mentioned at executive, there's that third option which it goes beyond subways and starts talking about transit network as a whole, and that was something that is now in the terms of reference. We didn't start there. It's a conversation that we think is really important in order to set the context for the kinds of investments that need to be made. So that is part of our process. That is something that we've already started sharing information on, but we want to bring those conversations to the table to see how, if at all, we can influence the province's trajectory.
Because if we don't know those terms, if we don't have that kind of information, I'm looking, for example, at a project that the province says it's a priority for them, the Eglinton West extension and having it underground. Who's going to be then paying for the maintenance of that tunnel? How are we, are we putting the horse before the cart? Which one is going to, it's a chicken and egg thing. We don't know what upload is, but meanwhile we're talking about these projects individually outside of actually having a framework about a network that actually is going to serve the people of Toronto?
Through the Speaker, I think what you just highlighted will be the kinds of questions that we're going to have to provide you answers on. So, you're raising the kinds of questions that in our heads and wanting to kind of, as quick as we can get you responses to that, because there's many question marks right now.
So are you formulating these questions as well with the principles and what Council has approved? So Council has a position that we don't believe the upload should happen. Council has a position on the priority projects, tranche 1, tranche 2. Are you going to the table with those positions, Council positions, and leading your discussions and leading your conversations and leading your arguments based on the positions that Council gave you?
I think through the Speaker, what you just said was really the basis for our March 9th meeting, where we spent half a day going through our entire network of projects and investments, and to try and, again, to make sure the context of transit in the City of Toronto is understood by the provincial representatives we're working with.
Okay. I just want to go over a little bit about your public consultation plan. You say, so the first meeting is going to happen in May, and then there's a series of public meetings as well?
Through the Speaker, that's right, Councillor. So we are still formulating what that public consultation is going to look like with our consultant. So the plan is to have the first one in May and then roll those out from there.
And you talk about stage 1 and stage 2. When is stage 1? from?
Stage one would be starting in May. We would do that initial consultation that would help inform the next report to council, and then if required, we would then have a stage two consultation once we have a more focused approach to what we're looking at.
Okay. And so will we be seeing more of this report? Will you informing councillors? Will councillors be able to participate as well as?
Consultation?
Yep.
So yes, so the consultation we'll do a very broad communications. We'll be using our website, we'll be doing advertising, we'll be using social media, of course, internal communications, so emails to councillors advising them of when these meetings and where these meetings are occurring, making sure that 311 are fully informed. So we will.
We had a motion about a public campaign about the city's position and informing Torontonians about city's position. Could this be complementary and feeding into this plan that you have?
So the report and the consultation is based on the terms of reference that we do a meaningful public consultation on the 3 streams that are in the report to executive that talks about, you know, what are those options, what do they look like. It does not talk about you know, advertising or advocacy or those types of things. It is focused solely on what are the options so that the public are informed about what it is.
But don't you think that to start the consultation that at least we need to tell people what's our position?
Well, there is no position per se. It is what are the options. There's 3 streams.
No, there's a position. We voted on a position.
Well, no, so
that was your last question.
It's the 3 streams, Councillor, that we are consulting on, not on the original.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I go back to the report that was before executive, before we got the news, before we got the letters. It's helpful at the beginning of the city manager's report that you quote the pre-election language and then go on to talk about what has been agreed to by the parties. But I'm troubled because the language about maintenance of the system that exists today was much more concrete pre-election, looking at such things that consistent with the intention of accelerating projects, but also to deal with the TTC's current backlog of deferred maintenance in its subway systems. And so they seem to have been really concrete about understanding our system. Now that the language is getting a little more nebulous, it's about networks and they should be safe and reliable, but then the emphasis is connectivity, although they are proposing a line that doesn't connect. My question is this. Knowing for several months now that they were going to make a commitment to maintenance, have you got staff developing a hard ask around the existing service? Do we seem to be in a table passed back and forth set of letters. Do we have a hard ask that's in an envelope ready when if things start to go pear-shaped, we're going to say this is our bottom line on the existing system?
So through the Speaker, I'm going to ask Rick Leary to speak to the maintenance challenges that TTC is facing and how we would address it at this table.
Well, I know what they are, but what's our hard ask?
Could I apologize and just say if you would ask the question, I apologize.
Okay, if I could get a few more seconds there, Madam Speaker. We've known for several months that they were campaigning on dealing with our own deferred maintenance and maintenance struggle in the existing system. Have we been in all this time developing our hard ask? In case things go pear-shaped at the table, are you ready to say this is the bottom line on the existing system that people are riding today?
So we've spent a lot of time with them, educating them on the capacity challenges that we have on Line 1 today. As you're aware, of trains, the need for trains and maintenance facilities, and the Bloor and Young Station redesign as well. So we've put that clear to them.
So you've sort of painted a picture for them, but we seem to be moving into we're now going to pass letters back and forth, and we're going to make them public so that we're sort of floating trial balloons with the public. Even as we're passing you, here's our bottom line, we want to expand these lines this way. That's pretty much what we got on October 22nd and 26th. Are we ready for a negotiation that goes, or sorry, thank you, Councillor Cole, March. Are we ready for, if that's the case, We need to have a letter that says, here's the bottom line on the existing system. What role do you want to take in the $33 billion of capital backlog over 15 years? And what role do you want to take in the operating? Our dream, months ago, we reminded you of this. Our dream always in this council chamber has been to return to the Bill Davis deal on operating. Is that our hard ask? And is it on paper and ready to be mailed?
Through Chair, it's a continuation of a discussion we have with them regarding the partnership and funding for the need of the capital investment plan, which was provided to you in January. We continue to talk to them about that.
But if I can, through the Speaker, as you well know, option 3 very clearly speaks to governance and funding.
Yes.
And so it's through option 3 that I think we want to have the hard ask provided to them, of which some of it you already have heard about, the $33.5 billion state of good repair challenge that Toronto Transit Commission is facing, of which, and correct me, I think about $20 billion of that is related to subways. So we want to be able to put the maintenance challenge that we have in front of us to them formally, as well as, you know, in terms of the ongoing operating. Because as you well know, we used to have funding from the province both for capital and operating, and I think all of that changed when amalgamation took place, but we may need to revisit it.
Do you feel, I've only got a few seconds left, do you feel you already have enough direction in our instructions about developing terms of reference that you would sit down and develop that hard ask, not as here's a handout, here's what we need, but we've actually sat down in our shop and developed an ask that is rational, that supposes that you have pressure from your taxpayer just as we have from ours. Here's what we think is a viable way for us to partner on the system that our riders are riding today.
That was your last question.
And through the Speaker, that is exactly what's envisioned in option 3, and that exact information we can provide them. I don't think we need direction on it. I think it's something within our ability.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong.
Yes, thank you. This question is for the city manager because he's been asked to develop, if approved, a public campaign. So there are those that believe that this is more of a political campaign to take some cracks at the provincial government. But if you're going to have a balanced campaign, will you have a balanced campaign that tells all the facts and both sides of the story?
Through the Speaker, yes.
So if you were to do that, there would be some information about funding levels, but if it's about uploading and who's going to construct transit, would you feel compelled to tell the good parts about and also the more critical parts about our history of building transit?
Through the Speaker, I mean, that was the point you raised at executive, and I think our answer to it then is today is, of course, we have to provide a very objective, balanced perspective on the abilities of all the parties to actually deliver on the infrastructure or transit commitments.
So if we were going to be completely virtuous and transparent, we would have to tell our story about the TYSSE, about automatic train control, and about fare card evasion.
All things that happen.
Through the Speaker, we would do that, but I also would make it evidently or abundantly clear that one of those parties has actually built subways, has maintained subways, and has designed subways. And
sure, one of them's built them, but has run up some pretty expensive costs and actually not really. You know, we don't necessarily get the gold star in terms of performance, right?
There are, and it's not unique to Toronto and its agencies. To be honest, there's never angels in these things. These are people that along the line make mistakes. That I'm sure they wish they could do things better, but I do fundamentally believe there's a tremendous amount of competence that is not just at the table, but is supporting the table. So whatever direction that we end up going in terms of investing in building infrastructure, I am confident between TTC and Metrolinx, IO, ourselves, and the Ministry of Transportation, we have enough talent to deliver what needs to be delivered.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perks.
Thank you very much. I guess my first question is to Mr. Leary. Mr. Leary, is there any point in building any new subways if we don't get our state of good repair of our existing infrastructure in place?
Through you, Chair, what I would tell you is that, again, as we talk at the table with those at the province about the importance of the Line 1 capacity needs. So the relief line does take capacity off of Line 1, but our urgency need is the other elements of the trains and the facilities and other things that would are a serious concern.
So the state of good repair has to come first?
That's correct for me.
Okay, thank you very much. To the city manager, looking at the report in front of us under public consultation, the terms of reference acknowledge, and I'm quoting, that meaningful public consultation is a required input to effective decision-making. To that end, during the process, the parties will conduct consultation with the public, including other key stakeholders. Can you point me to the effective public consultation that took place for the province to decide that these 4 were the priority lines?
Through the Speaker, I mean, again, we did ask for them to make clear their positions, and so we have those positions now in front of us. It's now our job to better understand them so that we can communicate that to this community.
Speaking specifically to the public consultation term, which, again, was a requirement that Council directed you meet in order to be at the table. Did you get that effective public consultation on the decision that the province has put in front of us that these are the 4 priority lines?
And if I can, through the Speaker, I think in the second letter, I mean, they do come back and reference the importance of taking these positions forward in the spirit of what the terms of reference require. So, and they are. So, I'm assuming that there is an opportunity to have a reasonable discussion about those positions that have been taken, and to see if we can't evolve them in such a manner that not just address administrative needs, but also the needs of this community. So, okay. It's kind of the way it's unfolding right now.
On the March 26th letter, the 4th bullet point says that before the next set of conversations, we, the province, require the city's assurance, given associated commercial sensitivities, that this information will be protected under the confidentiality provisions of the Toronto-Ontario Cooperation and Consultation Agreement. So, by commercial sensitivity, I have to imagine that there's a possibility that's a third party? There's a possibility of that? Because, I mean, the province of Ontario is, it's a publicly owned, it's a public government. They don't have a commercial sensitivity in dealing with us. There's a possibility this could be referring to, they're going to tell you about a third-party vendor they have in mind, maybe for this magical DRL technology.
I think through the Speaker, and the conversation at the table has really been about providing as much information as we can, certainly in the public domain. So those things that are hard and fast, confidential matters that we would, if we weren't dealing with this situation, dealing with other situations, that we would apply confidentiality to. I would expect that would hold true in this exercise.
We don't hold confidentiality when we're doing estimates on what it's going to cost to procure a subway here. That's all public.
Right. All I can say to you through the Speaker is that our goal every day when we sit down and talk to them is to try and get as much information as we can in the public
and that's
domain.
fair. But if at this April 9th meeting that they're discussing here, they bring a proposal for Bill and Ted's excellent subway company to build all the extensions and say this is commercially sensitive, you would not be in a position to provide that information publicly if you agreed to these terms, would you?
I think, I'd want to get some, I don't know, to be quite honest. I think I would like to push them on that kind of thing.
Okay. At the Executive Committee, and again here, you referenced that there are 3 different paths, and the third path, which is that the city retain the ownership and operations of the subway, and we have a conversation about funding. That's a particular path. Now, in the letters that we have received, just that were sent to us at 6 o'clock last night, the province said that they want to assume a lead role in the design and delivery and several other aspects of this subway. That sounds to me like path 1 or path 2. So by this letter, am I to take it that path 3, which is the one that you said best fits the directions council has given you, is off the table?
That was your last question?
I have not, through the speaker, received any verbal or written communication that says that they're not going to honor Path 3, but I fully understand your point.
Thank you. Councillor Cressy.
Thank you, Speaker. I'll direct my questions to the TTC, and I have a couple quick questions related to it. How many annual riders do we have on the TTC?
Last year we carried approximately 530 or 520 million trips.
520 million trips. Is that the largest in Canada?
It is.
How many rapid transit lines do we have?
There are 4 in our system.
And how many bus routes?
About 150 bus routes, almost all of which connect to the subway.
And how many streetcar routes?
10 streetcar routes.
So 4 rapid transit lines, 150 bus routes, 10 streetcar routes with 520 million annual rides. Is it an integrated system across those 3 different platforms, bus, streetcar, and subway?
Very much so, yes.
Are there risks if it is not owned and operated as one system?
There are risks that there would be substantial changes to the service given to our customers if the service is no longer integrated, yes.
So of those 3 lines, bus, streetcar, and subway, if you pull out one, they may not work together any longer.
We don't know the exact proposal, but they may not work well together if they are disintegrated, correct.
All right. I'll carry on with TTC before coming to the city manager as a heads up. Transit timelines. We heard from the province their Eglinton West tunnel proposal related to subway expansion. If there was an Eglinton West tunnel proposal, would that result in a delay to the Eglinton West project? Yes or no?
Through the speaker, we have not yet entered detailed design phase on Eglinton West. So we can't say whether there would be a delay in design. We haven't begun.
Would it take longer to build if we were to initiate a new study process with the tunnel?
Certainly, building a tunneled structure as opposed to an at-grade LRT would take longer.
It would take longer. Would it take longer to build the current one-stop Scarborough subway if we were to have to revise design work to accommodate a 3-stop Scarborough subway? Would it take longer to build?
Yes, it would.
Thank you. Would it take longer to build the downtown relief line, referred to in the provincial letter as the Relief Line South, if we were to redesign it with a new technology or alternative delivery system?
Until we actually speak to the province and find out what scheme they're actually coming up with, it's very difficult to make that comment at this point in time. We'd have to do an evaluation, both technical and commercial evaluation versus the current design.
Okay, so unknown. So we know it would take longer to build the Eglinton West with a tunnel option. We know it would take longer to build the one-stop Scarborough subway if there were 3 stops. It is at this point not yet known on the DRL, understood. As it relates to the Yonge North subway expansion outlined in the letter, if the Yonge North subway expansion was opened before the downtown relief line, is there a risk of capacity to the Yonge subway, to line 1?
That is correct. There would be a risk of capacity with the need on line 1.
Thank you. To the city manager, one of the recommendations outside of the $2 million which we are asking for cost recovery from the province on is a recommendation that we utilize some of that $2 million to conduct public opinion research, polling, on the public's view of the subway upload. Is that correct?
It's correct, and our head of chief communication officer can speak to all the specifics related to that.
No, I don't need the specific. It is correct that we intend to use money to test public opinion on this subject.
Yes, we wanted to make sure we were capturing a broad opinion across, all sectors of society, public meetings, polling, surveys.
Okay, so there is a recommendation to use public money to test public opinion. Is there any staff recommendation to use public money to shape public opinion through an education campaign?
No, there is not.
Thank you very much. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Fillion.
Yes, I have a line of questioning that would need to be in camera, and I have a motion to go in camera. I don't want to. I tried to put myself at the end of the list, so I'll move the motion because I'm standing. But that council resets its public session to meet as committee of the whole and closed session to consider executive 3.1. It's up on the screen, so I don't have to read it all out.
Absolutely.
And hopefully we can, I'm being optimistic, maybe we can finish by 12:30 and then go back in public after the lunch break.
Okay. There's a motion by Councillor Fillion on the screen to go in camera following lunch. No, but did you not say, Councillor Fillion, that a few members of council have, that's on the list, that you wanted to be at the end to have them finish, right? Or you want to do it now? Okay, okay, that's fine. All in favor? To go in camera? Now? Okay, carried. If I can ask the members of the public if you can please vacate the council chambers and the media as well. Thank you. City Council has completed its closed session consideration of item EX 3.1 headed engagement with the province on Toronto's transit system. No motions were made in closed session. City Council will now recess for lunch to resume at 2 p.m., which time we will resume our debate on this matter. Before we recess, I just want to remind members of council that Tabia is holding their annual luncheon in Committee Room 2 at 12:30 today. Recess to lunch.